good evening, or wherever the sun may find you. My name is Walt, and this is Coffee and Concepts on Keystroke Medium. So, what is it about coffee that makes it so magical? Hold on a second, let me try this. Yep, still magical. So what is it about it that makes it so magical? It has a tendency to be like salt or pepper. It's good on a lot of different things. So, one of the most unique uses for coffee, I've only tried a few times, mostly because my wife isn't a big fan of coffee, is as a rub or tenderizer for steak. Oh my goodness. I love a good steak. Big, thick cut with just the right amount of marbling, cooked about medium rare. Give me a cigar and a good cup of coffee, and I'm in heaven. It's just something about just sitting around afterwards and having that steak is just, oh man, all set. Fantastic. So there's a couple of ways to kind of get things going if you're going to be hooking up a steak with hey, John Evans, good morning, sir. Rick Barlow, hey, Rick. There's a couple of ways that you can get your coffee onto the grill and all over your meat. So, I mean, it's as varied and as widely used as any type of condiment or rub or treatment out there. So a lot of people are going to have a lot of different ways and recipes to kind of make this happen. A coffee rub on the grill is probably the simplest and quickest way to get a rub onto steak and have it so that it's easy to cook, quick to treat, and over flame very, 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 very fast. Tasty flavor, lots of fun. So fine ground espresso or your coffee flavor of choice is probably your best way to go. You don't want to go too coarse with the ground because then it really, on the grill, especially if you're using charcoal or hickory or something like that, that produces a nice like burn crust mark on the outside. If the grind on the coffee is way too intense or way too big, Jay Clifton Slater, good morning, sir, from Facebook. If your ground is too thick, or too coarse, you're going to have morning, Rick John Evans. You're going to have too much of a crunch on the outside, and it might be a little distracting from the flavor. So a fine ground espresso or coffee flavor that you like is probably your best way. You're going to rub it, grind it, kind of push it directly into the meat, and let it sit for about an hour or more before applying fire. The grounds themselves usually have the consistency of cracked pepper for a coarse grind, and if for a fine grind, you're barely going to feel it against your teeth. So I really like the coarse grind, not super coarse, but kind of like a halfway point, because it helps add to that burnt crunch from the grill, and doesn't take away from the flavor. Like I said, if the grind is too coarse, it's really distracting. The flavor of coffee on steak is slightly earthy, which is a nice balance for the heavy salts that are often in a lot of these different rubs, garlic or onion powders that people put on, different things. So you're going to have something that's going to balance the flavor of a lot of the saltiness that comes with a lot of these different things that people put on steak, as well as the saltiness that comes in steak itself. If you're looking for more of a marinade than a rub, try a double brew coffee. So run it through your coffee maker once, and then run it through a second time, and then put it over the stove and kind of distill it a little bit. Let some of that excess water burn off. And then you can also do this with an espresso. Put the espresso on, let it drain all the way in the cup, just enough to cover your steak, and then let it go cold. Pour it into a dish or plastic bag, submerge the steak, let it sit for a few hours. Better if you let it keep overnight, and then pitch it into the fire. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant flavor. I have yet to try any of these methods on venison. I'm usually very guarded about how we cook venison, just because of the fact that it's if we're going to have venison, we're going to get it because we got into a heated discussion with an animal that did not make it out of the discussion. So we don't want to risk ruining. So we really haven't experimented with coffee on venison yet. If you have tried it, please hit me up in the comments. Let me know, because I'd love to know whether or not it's a good idea. It's with the similar consistency taste, it might be a good idea. So I'm interested to try it, especially the next time Bambi and I get into an argument that ends in violence. So speaking of violence, let's talk about our concept for today. If you're writing scenes where wild animals are involved, just like anything else in the writing world, best to do your research before you trudge into the weeds. See what I did there? And then that way you don't get more wrong than right. Because contrary to popular belief, Disney is not the best source for animal investigations. Fox and the Hound, all that jazz might not be the best way to go if you're trying to do research and get your wild animal jam just right. So in the military, we have this thing called an indigenous animals class or an indigenous animals report that we get to go through prior to going to any country. So we don't do something stupid like pissing off a bird-eating spider or getting on the wrong side of an anaconda. These classes are a treasure trove for people writing about going deep into some place like Central America. And if you do, watch out for the black palm. If you don't know what it is, Google it. Horrifying. Or if you have to recover from, if your main character has to recover from a crash in someplace like the middle of the Hindu Kush, which stories could have that happen just because of the prevalence of our war in the Middle East for so long. New listener, Lynn Nadima, I hope I said that correctly. Hello to you from YouTube. Like I said, treasure trove of information that these classes were. You get to learn what's poisonous, what's venomous, and what is just plain nasty, so you should pretty much stay away from it. When your characters are stepping away from a city environment, they are usually the biggest thing in their trek. Okay, so that means that most animals are going to give them a wide berth, just on the off chance that they're dangerous. Duh, we're human beings. We're dangerous. Have you met us? So certain animals will most likely avoid humans operating outside of a city environment. Some might be curious and just watch, but they'll mostly do it at a distance. Certain animals have territorial natures based on what they see as their hut, their home, or their hole. That just got weird. I don't know. You sit on a fire ant hill, you're going to have an issue. Accidentally smack a hive, part of the colony might come to investigate, and if you're deemed dangerous, they have pheromones that they can release that are like, unleash the hounds! So bad things could happen. For the most part, large predatory animals will give you space as long as you're not violating theirs. You walk into an animal with score marks around the trees, check the height. Check the nature of the score marks. Irregular patterns in the score marks on the trees at about 4 to 6 feet, you might be dealing with a buck that's just trying to deglove the felt on its antlers. Slightly higher or definitely lower, closer to the ground, like where something might pee, you could be dealing with a bear ripping the bark to mark its kind of territory. For the most part, however, those animals, as long as you leave their space alone and don't enter their territories, are probably not going to get in your face and do something stupid. Jay Clifton Slater was saying that the closest I came was space cats fighting giant spiders near the engine room of a spaceship. That reminds me of that cool meme of the Weyland-Yutani Corporation of why they should have cats on spaceship, and he's carrying the little xenomorph alien. So right on, man. That's cool. Most predators want to do one thing. They want to prey on their preferred food source. And human beings are just big, goofy looking things that might be a little too much for them to handle. So for the majority, except for extremely territorial predatory animals, something like a tiger, which are extremely predatory, very hard to deal with and very hard to predict. Things like elephants in their natural habitat can often be very, very, very aggressive, especially to protect the herd. The big thing is a lot of times these things will warn you. You have a hood on a cobra, which is a huge warning sign. Back off. Rattlesnake has its rattle. Okay. That's not saying, hey, I'm looking for a fight. It's saying, I really don't want to mess with you. You leave me alone. I'll leave you alone. But a lot of times, a lot of these displays are not often something not all animals are equipped with these displays. For example, the Filipino cobra doesn't have a hood. It will hiss and taste the air just like any other aggressive predatory snake, but it's not going to flare a hood because it doesn't have it. Rick Partlow from YouTube saying Cape buffalo are damn dangerous. I do not disagree. So depending on the size and nature, most big animals are going to warn you prior to them getting into a fight that something is close to their size. The exception to this, some predatory fish, they just come up and they take a bite. It's how they investigate. Is it something they want? Is it something they want to leave alone? So a lot of times predatory fish are kind of the exception depending on the type. And of course, honey badgers, because they don't give a shit. They will mess your day up just because they can. So when you're writing animals, make sure to do that research. Make sure to dive in deep and get into some of the things that people have seen. Try to avoid things like if you're doing research on animals for a book or for a creative work, try to avoid, and you're trying to be kind of on point, try to avoid things like cute animal fun fiction stuff that a lot of times they get more wrong than right because they're trying to serve a story versus serving the animal's nature correctly. Like whales and dolphins aren't always friendly. You walking through the forest and encountering a snake, the snake is not always going to be venomous. One of the biggest problems that we had when we had gone down to Panama in the military to go to the Jungle Warfare Center was in dealing with frogs. The frogs are not aggressive. They're not territorial. They didn't want to hurt you. They just wanted to be left alone. However, the skin had a contact poison. So depending on the color and size of the frog, you could be dealing with numbness, you could be dealing with tingling, or you could be dealing with full-on paralysis or possibly cardiac arrest. So depending on the size and nature of the animal, you could just by stepping on it, touching it inadvertently, which is why we were always covered when we went anywhere in the jungle. But it's always good to know these things so that when you're trying to portray them in your fiction, you have them portrayed accurately if it's a native species to Earth or if it's something very similar to an alien biology on some other planet. John Evans, do you mean Gentle Ben lied to me? The cuddly bear and Grizzly Adam from days yore? And then Jay Clifton Slater saying mango and sloths, loved living in Panama, except for when you had to cross all the little tributaries and they told you to watch out for the sharks. Like, when are you going to encounter a shark in a stream? Duh, Panama. And just remember, if you're dealing with animals, like was said earlier, watch out for the murder button. Thanks for coming on this morning and sharing a little time with us for Coffee and Concepts. We try to come to you on Tuesdays. However, I had the opportunity to have a brilliant breakfast with my wife this morning, so we're coming a little late. If this time works better or worse for people, let us know. We'll see what we can do. Keystroke Medium Live happens on Mondays, varying times as they sort through the cacophony of stuff that is going on in everybody's lives. But as long as we have Josh, Scott, and Chuck talking everything reading and writing, I think we're pretty good with whatever time they hit. Tuesdays, obviously, I'm coming at you. On Thursdays, we have the Writer's Journey, where I believe this weekend, some goof named Walt is going to be talking about stuff that he might or might not know anything about. Something about punching people in the face. I don't know. We'll figure it out on Thursday. And that's 9 p.m. Eastern time on Thursdays, where Lauren and Kayleen, when they don't have some guy named Walt on, typically plunge the depths of creative writing and all the tips and tricks that make it a little bit easier so you can get into it. Rick Partlow saying, watch a bear eat an elk fawn if you want to see how gentle they are. You're damn straight. Lynn Nadima, I hope I'm saying that right. It looks like Nadima. And Jake Clifton Slater saying double week, Walt. Nice. Thank you for coming out. Really appreciate it. And don't forget also Josh Gayu does long form interviews on YouTube. Now listen, very important. We are on a mission to get 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. We definitely want this to happen. So hit that like and subscribe button. Ding the bell if you want to get notified of every time we go live. And we really appreciate you coming out. Appreciate you taking the time to listen to us spew about reading, writing, and a little bit more here on Keystroke Medium.